everybody, and welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast here on our Tuesday edition of the show. Also, NFL trade deadline going on as we speak as well. So we might talk a little bit on that as we go through the show with some breaking news, of course. But I'm Alec Aberna. That's Mike Wolfgang. Mainly, we're going to be talking about this past weekend's playoff matchups, as we had quite a few really good games here in the second slate. Obviously, Matt and I talked quite a few. If you're looking for Fitch's game, Hubbard's, Garfield's, JFK's, Canfield, Jefferson, Valley Christian, Lowville, Ursuline, Salem, or the Dalton or Danville games, we talked about that on yesterday's show. So today, if we didn't talk about it there, it's coming up on this show. So, Mike, without any further ado, let's get into it. And let's start out with the Cowboys from Cheney, who had a come-from-behind victory against Alliance in what I thought was a much-needed tough first game to get them started here in the postseason. They ended up coming out on top 35-21, but there were some question marks back and forth there early on. Alliance took the lead at halftime. It was 21-17, so real close. Cheney won the third quarter, won the fourth quarter. They pitched a shutout in the second half of this game, and after allowing 14 points in the second quarter, I thought that was just a huge step for that team to take. You go from a high-scoring offensive style game, and then immediately when Cheney's defense needs to step up, it does. And I think that's kind of been the heartbeat of this team all season long. And, from the rebuild is just defense. They sent people to the D1 level last year out of this group. They're going to send another guy in Hewlett to the D1 level with this defense this year. And, I think going through this postseason, Cheney is going to win with defense. They have very talented guys on offense. There's no doubt. They got a player in Waller whose likelihood going to the FBS as well. I know Toledo is thrown out there. I'm not sure if that is still the case with him or not. But this team has been such a defensively dominant group, and that's just kind of been the way they operate. And when you see them playing their best, it is just tough, attacking, physical football. And you've seen their biggest games of the year. Canfield, it was such a close, tight game. Defense won it for Cheney. Ursuline, their defense gave up a little bit more. They couldn't quite get them. This isn't a team in Cheney that I believe can win a 40-point game, but if you have one that they can keep in the 20s or under, that's probably their best case scenario. That's what ended up happening here. Their defense stood up just long enough for their offense to get out in front.
Well, I think that's the thing that we've been saying about them all year, is that we know that they can get things done offensively, but the calling card of this team, the identity of this team is their defense. And look at the middle part of the schedule throughout the regular season. They were in some close games, and they had to win it pretty much defensively. They were field goal games. They were games that were within a touchdown. And I think I was with Matt Friday for his game. I was helping him with some things, and we were looking at scores obviously throughout that Brookfield game, and this was one we were looking at because we were thinking, hey, this is one we thought Cheney kind of needed. I think we also done on the show going into last week and even last couple weeks of the regular season that we kind of wanted to go to a playoff game like this and kind of not. Obviously you got to rely on all sides of the ball in any game, but to try to get things going offensively, I think 35 points they got that done.
Yeah, and it's not going to be an easy second round for them. They have Kenston coming in from Chagrin Falls, and we already have discussed plenty of times in this show how tough of a region that has really been in that Chagrin Falls conference as well, on how tough that has gone along all season long, and the types of teams that this Kenston group has had to go up. I think Cheney is set up well, having a game like Alliance to start you out, and a 5v12 matchup that definitely felt a lot more like a 3v4 style of play. And now you have a Chagrin Falls team that, while they're ranked 13th coming in, they upset the number 4 in the University School Preppers in the first round, 40-33. So you're going to set up a really good matchup that obviously we'll be talking about Thursday and Friday between these two. But I think, getting the offense going early here in the postseason, combined with a strong defensive second half, should translate well into the style of physical football that Kenston is going to bring into this game that, once again, will also play to Cheney's strength. It's not like you're going to be seeing superstar track athletes running around everywhere. Hard-nosed, roughneck football, and I think that plays to Cheney's strength.
Yeah, I think that plays to them if they keep that going, especially at this Alliance game. If it keeps going against Kenston, or if they advance whoever they could play from that point forward, that's a pretty good recipe for them to go forward, because we know, like we said, we know what you're gonna get defensively with them. They're tough on that side of the ball, and they're good enough on offense to win games like this against a good Alliance team that had 8 wins, another Kansas team that had 8 wins. So that it's going to be obviously as you move along in the playoffs, it's going to get harder. But if they can do what they did against Alliance, they can go kind of far.
Well, Mike, speaking of going far in this one, if they would come out with a win, no matter who wins on the other side of this bracket, it's going to be a hard match. But it's either most people's favorite, I think, to win Division III football in Chardon, who sits at 9-1, or a very tough Geneva Eagles team that pulled the 9-8 upset over Gilmore Academy, 49-48. So, I mean, a 1-point win for them, but the very tough team, high scoring, obviously. Chardon's really great, and I know a lot of people have been talking about, that team potentially taking this region. And obviously, there's quite a few YSN teams that we would like to see, get rid of that narrative in Ursuline, Cheney, Canfield. I mean, all three of them have very realistic chances of going into the state semifinals. I mean, Canfield, Ursuline could decide who goes to a regional championship. It's kind of what we're hoping. But, to see a Cheney versus Chardon matchup, I think would be huge. My only problem, I mean, you talk about Chardon, how great they are. They do have the speed weapons. They are a do-it-all style of team. It's not just that tough football, which they can play in the trenches. They have speed going all around. And I think that will be the game if Cheney can get there. And if Chardon can get there, is going to be their biggest test without a doubt. I mean, Ursuline was great and all, and so was Canfield. But Chardon's a whole different animal. And it's a group that, you don't really see much around here. And when you do, it's typically with that group coming out on top. It's a very dominant program, and Cheney's going to have their hands full with it, and I think they're really going to get tested. Now, I won't tell you whether or not I think they'll come out with a win in that, because I'll have to save my pick for that regional semifinal if we get there, but I'm not 100% confident in Cheney's ability to get past that kind of team like Chardon.
I agree with that, but the one thing we always say at this point of the year, end of the year, coming into the playoffs too, that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, having a defense that travels, that's pretty good. And this defense can play anywhere.
That they can. Haven't had a ton of road tests, albeit on the season. I mean, their two biggest games, Canfield and Ursuline, both at home. And so was this one versus Alliance. So, when they go into neutral site games for regional semifinals, that really is going to be the test to see whether or not that defense can travel.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
But our next game up, Struthers went in here at home. They have trusted the climb, now extending their winning streak out to 6 games as they took down Edgewood 49-14. Now, if you watched Power Hour last week, Sammy from 440 in goal had promised everybody Edgewood was going to come out with an absolute dominant passing attack and air this thing out all over Struthers. That was not the case. Edgewood couldn't get their offense going whatsoever. Struthers was balling out with Alec Grizib. He was all over the place. He had a rushing touchdown that I believe made the NST Plays of the Week. So, I mean, it was a great performance from Struthers. I just had to throw that out there that, we were promised this Warriors team was going to have an electric offense unlike anything we'd seen before, and Struthers just went, not so fast, my friend. But what a great end of this season it has been for Struthers. And, most of the time when we talk about winning streaks, it's easy opponents. It's teams going through a bad slump. And, it's all about the timing. I don't think it's been that for this group for Struthers. I think they truly have just finally started living up to their potential that we know that they have. I mean, they started out with the win against Lakeview, and that was a good timing game, but you can't really discount what happened in the games before it. A 1-point loss to Streetsboro, the closest anyone has been to South Range in 10 points. You go to overtime against Hubbard, then things finally start falling your way. You beat Lakeview, you dominate Jefferson, you get Niles, you get Girard, and you take them down. What a great game that was. Then they beat Poland, another playoff team. Then you get to the playoffs, and you beat Edgewood. This winning streak right now is not a culmination of good luck or, getting the right opponent at the right time. This is just a team that is playing really, really good football. And at this point of the year, has a legitimate chance to potentially upset West Branch going into this Friday. It's going to be a hard game, obviously, on the road. And it's a team in Struthers that has been bad on the road. They're 1-3, so that's going to be a tough matchup for them. But I still I'm of the opinion that this team, they're just hitting on all the right cylinders. And I think that they can give West Branch a shot, especially with their lockdown defense.
Well, and I think the reason why you can say that is because that after that overtime loss to Hubbard, I mean, like you had a tough year, but Jefferson's a good team. Niles was our average. They weren't Niles of old, but that's still a good win. Gerard's having a good year, pulling, like you said, playoff team, and then what they did to Edgewood. So I always say, Alec, that the most dangerous thing, other than going to the playoffs with momentum, they're playing with confidence too. And I think that's obviously we'll see what they do against West Branch. That's a tough opponent to go up against in the second round. But when you're playing with confidence, you're playing with swagger, and you're knowing your assignments, you know what you're doing. That's what they've done in the stretch, and that's what they're going to continue to do until they get knocked out.
Yeah, I mean, I really think Struthers is going to give West Branch everything they can handle. Winner this one will take on the winner of Bookdale and Canal Fulton Northwest. Somehow Bookdale pulled off the upset over Woodridge as a 13 seed. Canal Fulton just held on against Streetsboro, but really whoever wins this upcoming matchup this Friday has a very good shot at a regional championship game on the 19th in a couple of weeks now. So this is very important. And if Struthers can get this thing done, I think that they are set up very well to potentially go up in a rematch against Girard, Jefferson, or they might get handed Beaver or Canton South as well. But really, either one of these teams, Struthers or West Branch, we're at West Branch, we're going to talk about it a little bit later. But both of these teams are set up very well to make this run.
They're set up very nicely to make a run, and I think they're capable of doing it. I don't really think no matter how it was set up, I think they're both capable of going places that they want to go to.
Yeah. On the other side of this game, though, was Edgewood, who had their best season in years. I mean, their first winning record since what I'm looking at here is 2012. They went 7-4. So it was a really great season for them. But obviously, when you play in the Chagrin Valley Conference, it's very hard to make a season that looks as good as it really was, because you have guaranteed matchups against Perry, Geneva, Kirtland. I mean, nearly impossible games for anybody to win. And not to mention, they lost out of conference against Jefferson, and they lose this final game of the season. But when you can say 3 of your losses were to Perry, Geneva, and Kirtland, all teams with realistic state championship aspirations, along with Jefferson, another team you could say has a shot at a state title this year if they can continue their run past the second round. Obviously, Struthers is another team that we just talked about. They have a clear path to the championship. They can get through West Branch. But you look around and you go, all right, yeah, your wins were solid. I mean, they were tight, hard-fought games, but you're going to get that when you play all these teams up north on the lake. It's all hard, gritty style of football. You're used to playing in the cold. You're not necessarily air raid teams. It becomes ground and pound style because that's just what you have to do this time of year, and it really favors these teams. It's part of the reason Kirtland is so dominant is their style of play. Bodes very well in cold weather, and obviously you got to play in some pretty cold weather if you want to make these deep runs. But I really think the only thing stopping Edgewood this season was the Big Four on their schedule, and you go into next year. I think you kind of hope you get that one against whoever the Jefferson opponent is, that one out of conference game that you're looking for. And maybe you hit 7-3, or you can pull an upset, get 8-2, something to get along. You're not going to win this conference with Geneva, Perry, and Kirtland, at least not until you establish your team as a premier program. This is one of those conferences that you look around the state, probably one of the best, if not the best conference out there. So it's gonna take a while if Edgewood wants to get up there and compete with the big dogs. But I thought that this season, first winning season in a decade, was a great stepping stone to get there.
And that too, that speaks to the type of season they had and finding a way. Obviously, they didn't win those big games, but navigating through it. Like you said, their wins were solid. But you got to eventually find a way, because again, Kirkland, we know how good they are. That's a team Matt and I were talking about on the Brookfield side of bracket. Nobody wants to play them ever because they're a really good team. So finding a way to navigate.
Wants them.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Yeah, sign me up for that. But
I'm going to be there if that's the case.
Oh yeah.
That'll be a regional championship too, so woo-hoo.
And we'll be watching that one.
War Eagle, baby. War Eagle takes down the Bees.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But for them finding a way to navigate through the schedule, and they're going to have to continue to do that because of how tough it is. So again, maybe getting upset next year when all the games are supposed to, they pretty much like they did this year, should put them back in the spot next year, and then we'll see what happens with that. But that was a good year for them for Edgewood.
Yeah, good year, and you made the postseason, so that's always a win when you can get there. West Branch, though, we were just talking about their opponent for next round in Struthers, but West Branch has continued on a fantastic season, and I thought their week 1 matchup against Field went about the way you expected it to, 52-20. I guess the only thing I look at for this game for West Branch was I would have liked to have seen better defense against a 4-6 team. That's kind of the one knock. 20 points, obviously, when you score 52, that's 8 possessions you had to score on. Likelihood is you ran 10 or 11, 12 possessions in that game. When you have that many, you are likely to give up a score. I mean, 1 and 4 is not all that bad when you talk about how many times Field actually got down the field to score. But I think it's still one of those games, and I think you've kind of seen this trend on their schedule that their defense really hasn't played up to par, and it's what cost them against Canfield. Their offense was able to pull it out against Salem, and against Alliance. But the deeper you go in this postseason, the thing against Struthers, it's what's really going to be hard. If Struthers is going to bring in a tough defense, and then you combine that with a very physical style of offense, and West Branch hasn't been able to stop offenses this season, you're likely sparring up for what is going to be a 15-round boxing exhibition, basically, between these two of just punch and counter punch. And ultimately, I think the one thing Struthers is going to have going for them is their defense might have played a little bit better this season. West Branch, obviously, with one of the best quarterbacks in the state and Drew DeShields and all of the weapons that surround him on this offense, they're going to be sitting just fine going after this game. But I still think it's a very realistic expectation to see West Branch struggle into this round 2 against a team that has good football on both sides of the ball. But ultimately, I mean, great season. We know this offense is going to show up. They've put up 40-plus points in all but 2 games of the season, and they haven't scored under 40 since they put up 38 against Ridgewood out of West Lafayette. And then before that, it was the 35-31 game against Canfield. So their offense has put up 30-plus in every game and only 40-plus in all but 2. So we know this offense is going to show up. If this team wants to make the deep run, though, take down a team like Struthers, be able to take down Canal Fulton or Bookdale, and obviously against Beaver, Girard, Jefferson, you have to have some sort of defense, especially as we get deeper into November. It is officially November 1st. And what do you expect this time of year? Ice, cold conditions. We're changing from fall to winter, and Friday nights, perfect time for it to start snowing. It just seems to be the case every year. And if West Branch defense doesn't show up on one of those cold, chilly days when it's raining or snowing or ice is falling from the skies, as it did, when we were up in Perry last year, Mike, then it's going to be a struggle fest for them. And their defense really needs to take one final step if this is going to be the team everyone expects it to be and make that regional championship run.
Well, that too, and I think that, again, regardless of the level of competition, they showed in the middle stretch of this regular season that they can get things done defensively. But closing out these last 3-4 weeks, and including this first round playoff matchup, they've kind of gotten loose with that. So if they want to advance, and continue to see this good season that we all know they've had, they got to tighten things up especially against Struthers, because I just talked about with their a couple minutes ago with their game, that when you're playing with confidence too, Alec, on offense, defense, special teams, like Struthers has been for a couple weeks now, West Branch wouldn't want to see a team like that. So if they don't tighten things up, it could be a good night for Struthers.
Yeah, and I do want to point out that, looking at what West Branch and their opponent in Mogador Field, Mogador in the final week of the season was shut out 33-0 to Woodridge, who obviously lost to West Branch in week 2 of the season, 43-13. But Woodridge finished off at 7-4. And I think it's interesting you look at, just the differential in defense. Obviously, it's playoff. Teams come to play a little bit more, putting a little bit extra effort into there. And obviously, Woodridge was fighting for a pretty nice playoff spot as well in that final week, how to make that statement victory. But I definitely think it's something to watch out for, that they can get 20 against West Branch, but weren't able to score against Woodridge in the final week. But obviously, we know West Branch is miles ahead of what Woodridge is.
Yeah.
Just something to think about there. But next one up, Brookfield. Mike, obviously, you said you were talking with Matt about this game on Friday. It was a performance we expected, 48-16, and all 16 came in the fourth quarter for PV. 34 points in the first quarter for Brookfield. Matt told me Christian Davis was going off. He finished 202 yards, 3 touchdowns. Pawlowski threw 4 touchdowns on just 8 completions on 12 attempts, 237 yards for him. Isaiah Jones pulled down 3 touchdowns for 171 yards. I mean, it was the performance everyone expected of Brookfield. And right now, this is a team, when you talk about expectations and, whether or not you've met them or exceeded them, the expectation for Brookfield this year, when they returned, 18 starters from last year, both sides of the ball. Obviously, some of those guys are the same guys on both sides, but when you have, 18 of your 22 guys coming back and you really only graduated, I think it was 3 or 4 last season, then you were clearly set up with people's expectations being conference title, state run. People expected states out of Brookfield this year. And I think when you look at what they did here in round 1, obviously against a very undermatched PV, but I think when you look at that and you talk about managing expectations, they have met expectations to a T. And my biggest criticism always of Brookfield was the players' attitude when it came to playing against teams that they were far better than, or even in same level. It's just, it always seemed when Matt and I called them, there was always a letdown, always something that went wrong with this group, or, their best player just didn't come to play that day. This was a case that really, it has happened a lot this season that I haven't seen in the past. The best players came to play. And here in the postseason, if Brookfield is going to meet the expectations that we have given them, then they're going to have to continue to do this. Yeah, Davis is going to have to consistently run for over, 100 yards. Isaiah Jones, maybe not 3 touchdowns every game, but he's got to pull in at least 1. He's a 3-star wide receiver here in the state of Ohio. And, we're in the past couple of seasons where we've called him, there have been a number of games where we were down on the field and everyone was like, all right, it's going to be Isaiah Jones' day. And he just did nothing. This season has been a lot better. Everyone's been a lot more focused in on what the goals of this team are going to be. And even if one of these guys has had a down game, they're still coming around in the 4th quarter or 3rd quarter or whatever it is when they need to make that play, and they can still come out there and play. It's a much more mature group this year for Brookfield than they have in years past. That speaks to the experience they've gained in the past 3 years, past 4 years for these seniors. A lot of them have been playing the full way through. And, at this point, these seniors have seen playoff games every year. Now, they haven't made any deep runs. I mean, this is one of their deeper ones in recent times. We'll see how they play against Downton this weekend, which is going to be a very tough matchup. Matt's going to make the drive down there. So Brookfield fans, you can tune into that one instead of making the 2-hour drive yourself, hour and a half drive yourself. Matt will do it for you. And you can, poor Matt, he has to go a long distance. I'm going to be chilling down in Boardman in a heated press box. I don't know what he's getting. But I hope
we got Brookfield on, not we got Friday. That's for sure. You'll be more warm than we were Friday.
Yeah, I'm hoping, though, that Brookfield can make this run and continue to meet expectations. I think everybody at this point realizes Brookfield's potential and what they can be. Now it's just the point of, can they keep it up? We know the defense is going to only allow about 2 scores, which, again, case here against PV, they only allowed 16, which is the most points allowed this entire season outside of Ursuline. So it's really the only hole in their team is that they allowed 2 more points than they average.
Well, the thing is, it's different year to year, because the only thing we know with Brookfield is that these guys have been together, like you said. They this is a core they've had for a while, and the reason why this year feels different. Again, anything could happen at this point forward, but the reason why it feels different to me is because they get a big win against a team like Garfield. They get, Springfield at that time was not playing good, but they turned things on, so we know what they were capable of. They've looked pretty good this year, and I think, going with this PV game, it was a game everybody knew that it was going to be a blowout. Everybody knew that they were going to win, but they pretty much did what they even said that they even told Matt that when I was down there with them on the field, that, asking Brookfield guys, the coaching staff, what do you guys want to do in this game? What do you guys want to see happen? They're like, we want to feature Christian Davis, and they did it, and they got their guys going, and the Jones brothers went off. So they have athletes. There's no question, Alec, we said this all year, and even go back to last year. This team has athletes, and we know they do. And it's just a matter of keeping it going. And I think this year it seems a little bit different. We'll see what happens against Dalton. That's another tough matchup you just mentioned and Matt was talking about. But this team is going to go as far as they want to go, as far as they allow themselves to go, because of it's not all about talent, but they definitely have that, and they know how to play together because they've been together for a while.
That's sure. All right, we're going to take a brief step aside, give a word to our sponsors here on the show, and then we'll be right back. So, folks, don't go anywhere. Casual Sports Podcast returns after this.
I support police funding, securing our borders, and parental rights in education. I'm attorney Mark Hanai, the only Republican running for the 7th District Court of Appeals. I will always follow the law.
Paid for by the committee to elect Mark Hanai judge, Dave Johnson, chairman.
Fall is in the air. The kids are back to school, crowds are cheering for the home team, and Myers Family Insurance is prepped for another crazy Medicare season. Every year there's changes, some big, some small, so it's important to have a conversation to make sure your plan is going to meet your expectations for the coming year. Give our team a call today to schedule your annual review.
For all your Medicare needs, call Myers Family Insurance or visit us on the web. Check us out online at myersfamilyins.com.
Locally owned and operated, Sheely's relaxed shopping experience means browsing and lounging is always encouraged.
Find Flex Deal and more at Sheely's Furniture and Appliance, because the best things in life happen at home.
I'm Mark Hanai, a conservative Republican. I believe in family values, the Second Amendment, and our Constitution. Vote for the only Republican running for the 7th District Court of Appeals. Protect your rights. Vote Hanai for judge.
Hey, welcome back into the show. Sorry, I'm looking at a couple of breaking stories. Steelers make another trade going on here.
Just saw that.
They are finalizing a trade for Commanders corner Will Jackson III. Not sure what the terms are so far. Denver just announced that they have made a trade with Miami. Bradley Chubb and a 5th-round pick are going to Miami for a 2023 first-round pick from San Francisco, a 2024 4th-round pick, and running back Chase Edmonds. And also looks like Udoka might be heading to the Nets after they fire Steve Nash.
A lot going on right now.
Yeah, right? We never get breaking news on the show. I'm kind of glad trade deadline's happening today.
It's as long as we have a minute here, I kind of like what the Steelers did, actually.
Yeah.
You're talking about if getting it, we'll see where they finish, but a top 4 pick, 30 and then a 40. That's for next year for this potential draft. It's pretty good for a team that's kind of looking to find themselves.
Right, and it's a rebuilding Steelers team too. That's the thing. I mean, getting young guys and making the move to get rid of some of their older players, I think is probably a good idea. I don't particularly love the Chase Claypool move because we know how dominant of a wide receiver he can be. I know he hasn't done much this season, but they really haven't been working with a great offense. And Matt Canada might be the worst play caller. I think that may be maybe the one spot you look at like, I don't love the move. I mean, that's a guy that can be a wide receiver number 1. I'm excited to see what he does with Justin Fields, though. Don't get me wrong. Fields has been getting better over there. So, that's definitely a move I'm excited to see for Chicago. And they sent their own 2nd-round pick instead of the one they acquired for Roquan Smith, who went to the Ravens last night. So, but a lot going on. It's an exciting time of the year.
Well, that's too on the side of the Bears. I like that because I kind of like what they're doing, getting a guy like Claypool because we know they don't have any weapons for Justin Fields, and getting a couple draft picks, freeing up some cap space. I think they're doing the right things in the rebuild so far. And the Steelers. Again, I think it's just the play calling because we know I said in the preseason they have talent on offense. This is why they drafted George Pickens in case they lose a guy like Claypool. So they're just a young team. They're not that far away, especially with the draft picks they got. So I think it's good for both
They
teams.
just need to find an offensive coordinator
And an O-line too.
Yeah, well,
that helps.
So those kind of go together, I think. Sometimes though,
Yeah.
you need a good offensive coordinator who can design the right scheme for the offense. And once you have a scheme, then you can build the line that matches that scheme. So we'll see how that develops. But back here to high school football, Southern had a great final week, or great week 11, I should say, as they beat South Central 65-21. And I was very excited by this score line, mainly because we hadn't seen their scoring since week 6 when they clapped Wellsville 64-6. They had slowed down at least a little bit here in the back half of the season. I say slow down. They put up 48 against Leetonia, 45 against EP, but I was looking at the big games, right? Valley and United. Against Valley United, they only totaled 20 points in those two games. So to see them go up against, albeit, not a high seed, but still a playoff team that, we hadn't seen them go up against playoff teams the entire schedule outside of Valley United, and they can come away and they put up that kind of offensive production. And at that point, 65 points, I think you kind of just forget what the other team does once you hit 60. You're like, yeah, there's so many possessions in that game. The other team's likely to score at that point. I mean, you're talking 15 possessions just to get up to those kind of numbers for Southern, likely, unless they scored every single time out. And then even still, it's 10, 11. So depending on how those extra points go and field goals and all that. But I'm really excited for this Southern team because they got the matchup they wanted. They wanted St. Paul and they got St. Paul. And not only that, they got St. Paul that is going to come down into their territory. We'll talk about what St. Paul did to get there in a little bit because they took on Lisbon. But when I was at the Valley game down in the Wigwam, talking with the coaches, they wanted St. Paul. That was the game they wanted most of all this year. It wasn't even talking state championships or regional championships, none of that. The focus was get to the playoffs and take on St. Paul and force St. Paul to come into town. And, we'll talk about the stats of that other game later, but it was a really great performance from both of these teams to go into this second round and match up with one another. And I'm really excited to see what this group does. It's the game they wanted. It's revenge. The last 2 seasons, St. Paul has sent them packing, and Southern had to go all the way up to Norwalk to do it. And now you kind of turn the rules around, and we'll see if Southern can do what they want to do and win this game and continue what has been a phenomenal season. And maybe the one thing I watch out for, we've seen in big games against teams with half a defense or more, that they have struggled to score. And you look at this St. Paul group, like we will later, and they can get you shut down.
Yeah, and with Southern, the fact is, I mean, they're just really not to break down just to hang 65 points on somebody. We all knew it was going to be a blowout, but that's pretty impressive. And their defense the last couple weeks, 2 weeks of regular season, not allowing any points. Giving up 8 giving up 8 in the first quarter, 6 in the second, and then locking them down till the fourth quarter with 7 points with the swap time touchdown. So they've been playing pretty good this year, and I think this matchup here against St. Paul, that's probably one of my this one in the Struthers matchup are two I'm kind of intrigued about, because just the fact that you just said with Southern, they wanted this matchup and they got it at home too. So we'll see if they can do what they want to do and get this one done at home.
All right, next one up. Liberty did not pull the upset over South Range. I'm a little sad. However, they did get 6 points in this game against the Range. So, I mean, that's some kind of a victory in my eyes for a team that no one really expected to do anything in this game. And they did just that. They did almost nothing, but they scored moral victories. And maybe on the other side of it, I don't know if this was a sportsmanship thing for South Range, not running up the scoreboard like they could have, or if it was Liberty. I did not get a chance to go back and watch this game. But I kind of look at these last 2 weeks now for South Range and go, all right, are you holding back from us or are you struggling? I think it's a legitimate question to ask. Hubbard and Liberty, and their totals from the last 2 games does not meet the total they put up in the game before that with 66 over Lakeview. They haven't hit that with their last 2 games. They're shy of it, but I definitely think, it's a little bit of a lack in production that I think you do at least have to ponder the question, are they holding back? Are they just doing this because they're the top seed and everyone expects them to make the run and they don't feel like they need to get this done early? I'm just worried if they hold back too much. They have Garfield on the horizon this week, and Garfield's a team that's going to take it to you. And you just wonder, it's been a while since this group has had to play 4 quarters with South Range. Last time they did it was Struthers in week 4. If South Range has to go into the 4th quarter of a game, in a tight game at that, I might be a little bit concerned, especially with how much they've been pulling back and not letting the offense loose, especially that first round. It's a time to stretch your legs, put everything out there, and get the party started. And instead, it felt like they were just a little bit reserved. They didn't want to go full force. Obviously, you don't want the injuries when you're expecting, another 5-6 weeks added onto the season. But still, for me, it's one of those, I look at and I go, all right, I mean, you won against the team you're supposed to win to, 1/16. But you look around and, it's almost the least impressive of games out of this week 1, victory-wise. Well,
first of all, and we've been doing we did it last week too, because we kind of figured they were going to lose this game, Liberty. But again, hats off to what they did this year, because making the quarterback change, young team shouldn't even have been there. I think 35-6. I try not to be into moral victories, but I think 35-6 in getting to the playoffs.
They did not lose with a running clock.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And I think the 35 points. I didn't even know the final. I knew South Range won, but I didn't check the final until just today. And I was looking 35 points against the Liberty team that I know has been playing better, but against a team that a lot of people think if the playoffs weren't expanded, obviously they wouldn't even be in. But a lot of people thought even after what they did, they shouldn't be in the playoffs, and only putting 35 points against them. I'm not getting on South Range or anything here, because they're still a really good team, but they got a tough one this week against Garfield. It's at home too, but I think it should have been a little bit more wider of a margin against Liberty. But
Mike, again, like you saying too, when you look at Liberty, and I agree with you. I mean, a great season. I've absolutely loved what they've done here in the end of the year. Credit. And I rang the bell. I pulled the upset on this game. It did not come to fold, but I'm still glad I took it, because I certainly respected the finish for Liberty of this season. I mean, you could have looked after they lost 47-6 to Brookfield. They could have rolled over, let this season just run its course, and have gone away with a 1-9, 2-8 type style of season. But they went in there and they fought, and they won a couple of really good games. I mean, I don't think 42-21 over Campbell, and the way I saw it happen, was any bad victory or any moral victories. That was a great victory for them. Then they beat Champion the next week. You get Newton Falls, you beat LeBray. Yeah, I mean, maybe Newton Falls and LeBray weren't all that much, but at the time, neither was Liberty. And they did everything they could to make it here into this postseason. And whether you grab the 16 seed or the 11 seed, most of the time your outcome is still the same. And I would say their first round performance was about where you expected it to be if this was going to be a half decent game for them. But I think it's interesting. You look at the schedule now. They lose the final game to Garfield, lose the first game to South Range. And now Garfield and South Range are going to go up against one another in the next round. You have a very similar common opponent now in back-to-back weeks. So 56-27 was Garfield, 35-6. Point spread, margin of victory-wise would go to Garfield and how they beat Liberty. Now, again, what was South Range holding back from us in this game, I think, is a big story of what's going to happen. But I think it does kind of set up an intriguing case nonetheless for this second round of, hey, both these teams just took on the same team in back-to-back weeks.
Well, the question is, are they holding stuff back, or again, was Liberty just kind of prepared for, they knew they were going to lose, but were they more prepared than we thought they were? I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I'd be very intrigued to go back and watch this game and kind of see a little bit more on that. Especially South Range is the team everyone expects to really a lot of competition in this region. I mean, you look around and, Garfield's going to give them something, sure, but Mooney, Norwayne, Edison had a big question mark. They go down. We're talking about them a little bit later on in the show, or in the next 20 minutes. But really, outside of Garway and maybe Perry, I don't think a lot of people were really expecting anyone to give South Range a shot. And for South Range not to get a running clock in round 1 against the 16 seed, I think it's going to look around to a lot of these other teams that are, going to miss their runs and trying to make pull a couple upsets along the way to go, hey, there might be some blood in the water up there, and they're going to be like sharks circling in. Everyone's going to give South Range their best game. That's what happens when you're the top seed. You're going to get everybody's best, and we'll see if they can continue to weather the storm. They've done so far in the season. I don't really see a reason why they won't continue to play well with how strong that defense is. I mean, no one outside of Struthers has even been able to hit 20 points against them. So I'm not overly concerned with this game, but it does make me wonder, what's the slowdown here in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I'm not concerned about them, but it's the reason why I'm not is because, as you just said, the level of competition, we all know it grows as you move on in the playoffs, and you're not going to blow out every team out like you did in the regular season because you played some teams that weren't even close to your level in the regular season. So they have the good defense, they have a great team, they have athletes everywhere. We all know that. I'm not worried about them at all because just of that factor. But I did expect more from them in that Liberty game, but again, Liberty, whatever you want to say, they shouldn't have got there or what. They were there. They held their own. Their defense is pretty good, South Rangers. So I'm pretty excited for this one against Garfield.
Yeah, it's going to be a very fun matchup. That's certainly the case. But Mineral Ridge, our next game up, they got absolutely waxed by Canton Central Catholic, 35-7. And what a letdown this was here at the end of the season for them, right? I mean, this is a team I think, won their own fans and quite a few around the region were like, hey, this Ridge team, they could potentially make something out of this season, make that nice little run. One of the most promising teams in Division 6 with how good of a season they have had this year. I mean, really, their losses came, it was an upset from Springfield that pulled it, and then they went up against a great Lowellville team. And then again here, second time in 3 weeks, an offense that had been averaging 30-plus points a game gets held to 7 points in a tough matchup. And, I do feel for this team and, for those fans because it's definitely a question mark here at the end of the year. Like, what went so wrong? Big part of it, they couldn't stop the ground game. Jack Talkington from Canton Central Catholic had 151 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. That was kind of the, end all. There was a fumble, and it was recovered by Canton Central. So, there was just the key moments just didn't go their way in this game, and that was the big problem. And really, same thing against Lowellville. They just couldn't get the big plays to go their way. And, give credit, they fought in this game, but when you get held just no points in the first half, saw it last night in the NFL with the Bengals. It is just so hard to overcome because you haven't gotten anything to go right all night long. And this was the case again when they went up against, albeit a very good Canton Central Catholic team. I mean, this was a 7 versus 10, and Ridge was the 10. They lost. I mean, if you look, say, hey, the favorite's going to win 9 times out of 10, this was that 9 times out of 10 they talk about with favorites winning a game. Canton Central Catholic did just that. In that strength of schedule, I think, one, it kind of bit Mineral Ridge. They weren't ready for a game like this. And Canton Central Catholic, they had an absolutely much better strength of schedule than the Ridge did. And, no fault of that. I mean, scheduling it isn't always a year-to-year thing, and you put a team on the schedule, you hope they're good, and you hope your conference is competitive enough to get you ready for those games. Wasn't the case this year for Mineral Ridge. Obviously, the 2 losses along the way, but I thought all in all it was a good season for them. Obviously, you wanted to end off a little bit better. Not the case. Canton Central moves on. Likelihood is, though, against Mogador next week, the winner of this game, it wasn't even going to matter. We'll see what Mogador does to Canton Central Catholic. But all in all, I mean, I would have liked to see Ridge do a little bit more, but doesn't fall their way.
Yeah, but I thought, that Lowellville game, although they lost it, they played pretty good against that high-powered offense. 21-7 they lost. And I kind of thought, they played them pretty close. We'll see what they do in the playoffs, but I didn't expect them to get waxed like that. I don't think any of us did because we thought, especially going to that Lowellville game, we thought they could give them some fits, and they did in some ways. But I didn't expect to blow out like that. And for Mineral Ridge, like you said, it's been a good regular season. Didn't end the way they wanted it to after what we all thought of them, what type of year they had. But they just didn't do much. And like you said, when you can't do much to start the game, we'd always talk about setting the tone early. I don't care if you're the underdog or the favorite. If you can't set the tone early in some type of way, you're not going to beat a team like Canton Central Catholic or anybody in the first round of the playoffs and beyond. So that's something that they kind of take into the offseason, but pretty good year for Mineral Ridge.
Yeah. And then a playoff run here for our next team, Lisbon. They go down in the first round, but as a 5-5 team, sometimes, you're just lucky to make it. They had clear problems all season. And again, just like a team like Jackson Milton, you win the games you're supposed to, you lose the games you're supposed to. It was an average year. And they went up against a good playoff team, a perennial playoff team at that too. And they fall. They lose 64-20 to St. Paul, who's now going to take on Southern. And I think it's very interesting when you compare the matchups between St. Paul and Southern, how they each fared in the first round, seeing each other coming up on the schedule next. I think that there was a real scoreboard watch going on between the two, because Southern wins 65-21, St. Paul wins 64-20. Same scoring differential between the two, and only 1 point more for each group. So I think there was a bit of a competition going on there of who could win better. I think it really sets up a very exciting matchup this Friday between Southern and St. Paul. And for Lisbon, the road comes to a close here. Unfortunate, yes, but expected, also yes.
Oh, obviously expected, but Lisbon, like you said, we might have been lucky to get in at 5-5 because we said about a couple teams today. But not much in this one here when it's 64-20. It just kind of sets up to the preview that we want to talk about Southern and St. Paul, because eyeballing each other, or possibly, like you said, and I don't know if they have. I'm not accusing them of doing that, but the scoreboard watching, definitely, because it was pretty identical score. So kind of looking at each other all year. We know Southern kind of wants to get the St. Paul game going at their home stadium too. So not much from this one, just the one that's setting up the St. Paul and Southern matchup.
Right. This was just the prelude.
As well as the Southern first round matchup. Yeah.
Yeah. These were the prelude to the game between these groups. So should be interesting. But not to fear, Lisbon folks. You still have a team in the postseason. The Beavers continue a great season after a bit of a first half scare against Coventry. They do pull this out 56-35, but I'm calling my game last Friday, watching the scoreboard tab on the network, and I keep looking down and I keep going, Coventry is in that football game. They were in it for a while. Beaver ultimately pulled away as expected and won this game. But again, when we talk about teams kind of playing away from expectations, this was one of them. Coventry was not a team that was supposed to stick around with Beaver. And I definitely think it opens up some concerns throughout the rest of this playoff. I mean, Coventry had lost their last 3 games before it all handedly. And it's one of the higher point totals they've had on the season, obviously coming at a loss. And Beaver gets quite a few points on the board of their own. But I think this definitely becomes more and more of a team to watch as they go deeper into this playoffs, because to me at least, the schedule they play and the way they play, they feel a lot more like they should be in Division 6, Division 6, Division 7. I think fits kind of, their style a little bit better. That's not the case though. They play up, they play in Division 4, and they're going to get a very, very tough matchup against Canton South this week. And I don't have a ton of confidence in, especially with the problems they had early on against Coventry. They've now allowed 70 points in their last 2 games after you go back regular season, they had in total allowed 131 points throughout the entire regular season. And now in the first round, you allow 35. So, I mean, definitely some problems for sure. But the defense, obviously the offense figured itself out. But going up against a group like Canton South this week, and we'll talk about it, you can't have that slow start on the offense. They got to be ready to go. And I think they will be. But I think this was a good test for them in round 1 to see, hey, you had a slow start. What can you do after?
Well, and being able to rebound from that like they did is gives you confidence that they can get things done in this matchup. It's a matchup of 2 9-win teams of this year, so it's pretty evenly matched, at least from the win columns. But from this Coventry matchup with Beaver, I don't think there was too much that we didn't expect, because I thought they were going to win this game too. They've had a good year, beat some good teams, but I think it sets up, as I just talked about some other teams, you're going to get better matchups as we move on. I think you're going to get another one here with like I said, with 2 9-win teams. So I'm excited for this one on this weekend.
Yeah, But talking about upsets, we saw a big one this past weekend. Cardinal Mooney at 5-5 pulled the wall over the eyes of the undefeated Edison Wildcats. And a great season ultimately for Edison comes to an end. I think everybody would have liked to have seen him go a little bit farther. But much like I talked about last week with Mooney, their football program, it just felt very reminiscent of the last year's basketball season, last year's baseball season. A mediocre looking group at 5-5, an average schedule, average record. You're not looking great. You're not one of the teams anyone expects to go anywhere. And they come in and they get the job done 45-14. And that's the most points scored by Mooney's offense all season long. They finally get something going. And again, I told you, watch out. This is a group that I feel very realistically can make a postseason run. And Mooney gets it done in round one. Now they got Norwayne coming up, which is going to be an absolute monster of a game. I mean, you talk about two big, tough, physical teams. That's what this matchup is going to bring you. Now, I haven't seen Norwayne since 2020. It was a very different team than the last time I saw them in person. But farm boy country out there with Norwayne. Their stadium is in the middle of cornfields. You look around and it's just cornfields for miles. That's the style of football. Cornfield football, Nebraska, Iowa, teams like that. Physical, offensive linemen, big boys galore. And I think Mooney matches up well to that. So I'm very excited for that matchup. And I definitely think it's a game Mooney can win if they can keep this thing low scoring like they did against Edison and limit their opponent's points.
Talk about saving your best offense for the playoffs. That's what they did. I mean, seriously. I don't think this
is your best for last.
Well, I don't want to say last because they're still moving, but
yeah,
I was going to say last, but I was like, dude, they just saved for the playoffs because that was a good point total. They put up against really good Edison team, and I don't know if I was shocked that Mooney won. I'm just shocked that again what they did on offense and the way they pretty much won this game. It's pretty dominant.
And I think that goes to show you that this Mooney team, they put together a tough schedule that gets you ready for the playoffs. And that's the thing when you watch Mooney athletics, they're not worried about the regular season. What that school cares about is banners, man. And they are collecting them. That you go into their gymnasium, almost every inch of their wall is covered in a banner from the last 50 years. It is what this school is built around. And they want those banners. They're hunting. They want those titles. And this Mooney team, well, you look at it, 6-5 now with the win over Edison. And well, no, they haven't looked great this season, certainly. But they're still a team everyone looks at and goes, those boys can do something.
I think Ursuline saw that in week 10. And I think that could have given them some confidence going into this Edison game. Like
I think it had to have.
They got fired up to play their rival that, Ursuline's having a great year and Mooney wasn't having as great of a year as them. And they did that in the rivalry game. And I think they kind of, fired them up for this game. I think they could for the rest of the way.
Yep. Well, United last Friday put up the most points in program history with 62 in the postseason over Rootstown, which very impressive win. I mean, 62-49. I think I can guarantee one thing for them, though, in this second round. You're not putting up 62 points. They have Kirtland this week. So we'll see what they can do. Everyone talks, we're talking Brookfield, Kirtland, Valley Christian, Kirtland. United, in my opinion, they have a realistic chance to get something like this done. No, they are not the best team. They lost the only 2 games that matter on this entire schedule for them. But on any given Friday, something can happen. And with 62-49 against Rootstown, a Rootstown team that, was 7-3 and a pretty good 7-3 at that, and had a fairly nice schedule going around. But, United gets it done with 62 points. They're not going to be able to play a game like that, though. Their defense has to sharpen up against Kirtland. That's the one thing. In the 2 games that mattered, their defense and offense really did a whole lot of nothing. 46-17, or actually 50-17 is the combined total from the 2 games that matter during the regular season for United. Again, any given Saturday, or any given Friday, anything can happen. But it's going to be one heck of a matchup. I might be ringing a bell.
Yeah, we'll see. I think with United, though, again, the 49 points against a team that was 6-4 in the regular season, barely, finished barely above 500. I think that's kind of worrisome because going up against Kirkland, like we just said, that's a different animal right there. But like you said, it's not always about being the most talented team in the playoffs. Actually, I think that's out the window in the playoffs. It's not always about being the most talented or even being the best team. It's about being the best team for that night that you're playing, for those 2.5 hours. So I think that's what United's got to do.
And that's what Springfield has done the last couple of weeks. They pull off the win over Matthews 42-0 in a bit of a shocking style. I don't think anyone saw the game going that direction, but a very impressive win. A great season ultimately for Matthews comes to a close. I don't think anyone expected a deep run for him, maybe a little bit deeper, but it was just that first round matchup. You weren't in a favorable situation against a sprinting Tigers team that was ready to tumble into the postseason. They did just that. Back-to-back shutouts now in the last 2 weeks. They've beat opponents and combined 97-0. Now they get the big dog, Warren JFK, the Eagles from up north. Mike, I like Springfield. They have really turned it on here in the back half of the season. I mean, they have allowed 7 points in the last 4 games, just 21 in the last 5, and 42 in the last 6. I mean, you talk about a dominant stretch from the season after they allowed 120 in their first 4 games of the season. It's been one heck of a turnaround for this group. I'm very excited to see which direction they go. And I think it's a group you look at now. It's like, all right, are they 7-4 or are they 7-0? Because it feels like they hit the reset button against Mineral Ridge. And since then, they're a whole different team.
I'd lean past them being 7-0 because I think they're 100% different team. But I also really do like JFK in this matchup too. I know you do. 10-1. They've had a great year. Had some really big wins. This is a really, for Springfield to turn things around and have this matchup here, I don't think they could ask for anything more from the way they started. So they got an opportunity to beat a team like JFK, who's been really, really good this year.
And Mike, and you talk about JFK and why they're going to be the favorites in this matchup. They had a postseason spot locked up since week 2 of the regular season.
Yeah,
they won in week 2, and they've been guaranteed a spot ever since.
But they've kept going.
No other team even clinched in D7 until I think it was week 6 or 7.
Yeah,
and that just goes to show you how dominant this group is and the type of schedule they put together, I think, is the other half of that. The fact that, they could have afforded to lose more than once and still have been in the postseason with how great of a schedule they had. And really, they could have lost a couple of games and probably still been a top 4 seed. So it's going to be one heck of a matchup. Might be seeing an upset, but unfortunately, we are out of time here today. We just get it in here at the very end. But I've been Alec Caberna. That's Mike Wolfgang. I was seeing if there was any more trades going on before we were closing out. Yeah. Oh, we do have something. 49ers are trading Jeff Wilson to Miami, a running back. So not a massive trade, but something to end out the show. But I'm Alec Caberna. That's Mike Wolfgang. That's all we got. We're going to figure out something to talk about tomorrow. Matt will hopefully be on the show. That does it for us. Power Hour coming up next on your sports network.